After the consolidation of the first villages and small communities, humanity began to face larger challenges. The need to organize resources, protect the group, and maintain order led to the emergence of more complex forms of leadership and the centralization of power. As populations grew, communities that had once been simple clusters of families transformed into permanent settlements, where agriculture became intensive, providing food surpluses capable of sustaining a larger population. These surpluses were the foundation for trade between neighboring villages, a practice that not only facilitated the exchange of resources, but also allowed ideas, techniques, and cultural practices to spread. In this way, the earliest signs of organized economies began to emerge, with traders and artisans assuming essential roles within these communities. Within this evolving structure, the role of the central leader became increasingly important. Initially, these leaders were chosen for experience, strength, or wisdom, but over time, power became consolidated through inheritance or conquest, creating the first forms of formal hierarchy. These leaders were responsible not only for organizing defense and food production, but also for guiding rituals and ceremonies that strengthened social cohesion. Religion and ritual began to play a strategic role, legitimizing authority and creating norms that maintained order and encouraged cooperation among members of the community. The merging of political and spiritual power marked the beginning of structured societies where laws and traditions began shaping everyday life. Simultaneously, architecture began to reflect the growing complexity of these communities. Stronger buildings constructed from stone and timber appeared not only as dwellings, but also as central spaces for gatherings, trade, and decision-making. Public spaces became focal points where leaders could communicate decisions, where artisans could display their craft, and where villagers could participate in rituals that reinforced shared beliefs and values. The arrangement of these early towns was deliberate, reflecting not only practical needs but also the emerging social hierarchy and the increasing importance of centralized authority. Roads and pathways were created to connect different districts, ensuring the flow of goods, information, and people, laying the groundwork for early urban planning. Innovation and technology also advanced in parallel with social complexity. Tools became more specialized, enabling more efficient farming, construction, and craftsmanship. Techniques for preserving and storing food improved, allowing communities to survive periods of scarcity. Pottery, weaving, and metalwork emerged as both practical and cultural markers, signifying status, skill, and influence within these early settlements. These developments not only enhanced survival, but also began to shape the identity and culture of each community, creating distinct traditions and practices that would influence generations to come. The combination of centralized leadership, organized trade, architectural planning, and technological innovation marked a crucial turning point in human history. Communities that successfully managed these aspects began to thrive, attracting more people, consolidating resources, and accumulating knowledge. Power became increasingly concentrated, and with it, the foundations for the first early states and proto-civilizations were laid. This period set the stage for the complex societies, empires, and civilizations that would emerge in the following millennia, demonstrating that the management of resources, leadership, and culture was key to humanity's progress. As settlements grew into early towns, the complexity of human society increased dramatically. With more people living in concentrated areas, the organization of resources became a critical factor for survival. Villagers developed new farming techniques, including irrigation channels and crop rotation, to ensure stable food production throughout the year. These innovations allowed communities not only to feed their population, but also to generate surpluses for trade, creating the foundations of early economies. Markets and trading hubs began to appear within towns, where artisans, farmers, and merchants exchanged goods ranging from pottery and tools to grains and livestock, establishing the first regulated trade networks. The social structure of these towns also evolved. Clear hierarchies emerged, distinguishing leaders, warriors, artisans, and ordinary villagers. Leadership became more formalized, with certain families or individuals holding authority over generations. These leaders managed not only the distribution of food and resources, but also the coordination of defense against external threats. Fortifications and simple walls were built around settlements to protect inhabitants from rival communities or nomadic raiders. At the same time, warriors and defenders were trained to maintain order, safeguard trade routes, and enforce the will of the leadership, giving rise to early organized military structures. Religion and cultural practices became deeply intertwined with governance. Leaders often claimed divine guidance or spiritual authority to legitimize their rule, while rituals and ceremonies reinforced community cohesion. Temples or sacred spaces were constructed in central locations, becoming focal points for both religious and political activities. These spaces were not only symbolic but practical, serving as meeting places for councils, dispute resolution, and the announcement of new laws or communal decisions. The merging of political and spiritual power ensured that societal rules were respected and internal conflicts minimized, setting a precedent for more complex governance in future civilizations. Technological advancements accelerated alongside social development. Pottery evolved from simple utility vessels to intricate designs reflecting cultural identity and status. Metal tools and weapons began to appear, providing significant advantages in agriculture, craftsmanship, and warfare. These early technological innovations allowed towns to expand their influence, control larger territories, and sustain larger populations. Knowledge was gradually accumulated and transmitted through generations, creating the first instances of organized education and apprenticeship within trades. This exchange of knowledge strengthened social cohesion and fostered innovation, preparing human societies for even greater achievements. As towns grew, trade networks expanded beyond immediate neighbors, connecting distant communities and encouraging cultural exchange. Roads and paths became more structured, facilitating the movement of goods, people, and ideas. Interaction with neighboring settlements brought both cooperation and conflict as resources, land, and influence became increasingly contested. These dynamics contributed to the evolution of early diplomacy, alliances, and rivalries. The foundations of social, economic, and political organization laid during this period created a blueprint for the rise of city-states and early civilizations in the centuries to come, demonstrating that the management of resources, leadership, and culture was the key to human advancement. As early towns expanded, the divisions within society became more pronounced. The accumulation of surplus resources allowed certain individuals and families to acquire influence and wealth beyond the needs of daily survival. Leaders in their inner councils began to consolidate power, establishing roles that would eventually evolve into the first administrative positions. Artisans and skilled workers gained recognition for their expertise, while warriors were elevated for their ability to protect the town and its surrounding lands. This growing stratification laid the foundation for distinct social classes, where responsibilities, privileges, and authority were distributed according to one's role within the community. Fortifications and defenses became increasingly important as towns faced external threats. Walls constructed from stone and timber surrounded settlements, and watchtowers were erected to monitor approaching travelers or potential raiders. Organized patrols and early military units were established, introducing structured training and strategy. Conflict over resources and territory became a defining factor in inter-community relations, prompting negotiations, alliances, and sometimes violent clashes. These interactions shaped early diplomacy, while also demonstrating that the control of land, trade routes, and resources was essential for the survival and growth of any settlement. Cultural and spiritual life continued to reinforce the power structures. Temples, ceremonial platforms, and sacred spaces were carefully integrated into the town's layout, serving as focal points for religious observance, legal decrees, and communal gatherings. Leaders often claim divine authority or guidance, using spiritual influence to legitimize their decisions. Rituals, festivals, and symbolic displays of power communicated both to the town's inhabitants and to outsiders the strength and organization of the community. The intertwining of political, economic, and spiritual power ensured that societal rules were observed and cooperation within the town was maintained. Meanwhile, technology and craftsmanship advanced rapidly. Metalworking allowed the creation of stronger tools, weapons, and agricultural implements, enhancing productivity and military capability. Pottery and textiles became not only functional, but also markers of status and identity, reflecting the emerging culture of each settlement. Knowledge was systematically passed from generation to generation, establishing early forms of apprenticeship and education. These advancements enabled towns to sustain larger populations, control surrounding territories, and influence neighboring communities, setting the stage for early forms of governance that would later evolve into city-states and kingdoms. The growth of trade networks extended beyond immediate neighbors, fostering cultural exchange and economic interdependence. Roads and river routes connected multiple settlements, allowing the flow of goods, knowledge, and ideas. Interaction with distant communities introduced both collaboration and competition, as access to resources and influence became increasingly valuable. The dynamics of trade, warfare, and diplomacy during this period illustrate how early human societies balanced cooperation and conflict, laying the groundwork for the rise of organized states and complex civilizations in the centuries to come.